Over at Marine headquarters, three men were in a very important meeting. One insisted that the Navy could not afford to let the Revolutionary Army remain unchecked. The Fleet Admiral agreed, but they simply didn't have the troops to spare right now. However, the situation was bad. Their enemy was now being referred to as Flame Emperor Sabo, the hero of the entire world. The officer continued to say that 800 years ago, the world government was created by 20 founders, and of their descendants, only Nefertari Cobra, king of Alabasta, attended this year's Reverie, which was exactly why the chief of staff murdering him was so meaningful to the revolutionaries. Mere hours before that in the Holy Land, the enemy destroyed the symbol of the Celestial Dragons in a declaration of war. Both the Marine Admirals Ryokugyu and Fujitora engaged in the ensuing battle. But ultimately, the former revolutionary and Celestial Dragon slave, Bartholomew Kuma, was freed, and every single one of them managed to escape. He was sure that it must have been difficult for the Admirals to go all out in the Land of the Gods, but Akainu did not care for excuses. But he wanted to know if there was any update on the simultaneous disappearance of Cobra's daughter, Princess Vivi. Tensei, director of the Naval Bureau of Investigation, admitted that they were still looking into things on that front, along with any possible connections between the two incidents. Akainu was sure that this was a double blow for the Desert Kingdom. Tensei added that their country's ship was still docked at the Red Port. They could not be permitted to go home at a time like this. Admiral Kizaru chimed in, wondering if they could assume that the attempted murder of St. Charlos was now solved. To this, Akainu mentioned the accusation that St. Miosgard allowed the attacker to escape. That matter was being handled in the Land of the Gods by the Holy Knights. It was a total mess that the Marines would stay out of. Tensei responded that in each case, the public seemed to believe that Sabo was the mastermind behind it all, which was causing quite a stir. Not to mention the 8-nation revolution that occurred while the kings were away from home. At this point, many sparks of rebellion were smoldering all over the world. Many were even beginning to worship Sabo as if he were a kind of god. Weapons were raised and cheers rang out for the Flame Emperor, Sabo. At this point, due to his popularity, it's possible that Sabo may be even more influential than the leader of the revolutionaries, Monkey D. Dragon. Kizaru also mentioned the issue of his brother Luffy now being a Yonko, something that also encouraged the resistance, as they could no doubt see that times were in fact changing. Akainu overlooked the water and lamented the fact that he ended up becoming Fleet Admiral in such a turbulent age. But to him, it didn't matter what enemies come at them, because he would drive each and every one of them back into the depths of the sea. Over in the Kambabaka Queendom, Koala was being comforted by her fellow revolutionaries. On the bright side, Sabo was fine. Knowing that everyone was safe, did manage to cheer her up. Eva shouted that miracles should be celebrated whenever possible. Morley was already plotting revenge against Sabo for making them all worry so much. Karasu knew that Cobra's death happened after they split up, but still wanted to believe in Sabo. Lindbergh rocketed through the air, frustrated that the North Army's commander said as much before he could. Bello Betty, meanwhile, had enough of their antics and wanted everyone to pipe down. Turning to their leader, Koala called out to Dragon, clearly worried about him. The commander-in-chief acknowledged that Sabo was alive, but if he truly did kill King Cobra, there would be reckoning between them, no matter his reasoning. From there, Dragon spoke to Kuma, asking him what he had seen. The cyborg then did as he was commanded. Tears filled Koala's eyes, but this was all interrupted by a sudden Den Den Mushi call, one that was being listened to over at Marine headquarters. Knowing that it could be the Flame Emperor, they quickly rushed to record and trace the signal. Koala told everyone to shut up. They all crowded around as she answered the phone. It was Sabo. Meanwhile, on the Thousand Sunny, much to the fright of some sea monsters, Luffy loudly exclaimed that the news couldn't possibly be true. There was no way his brother would kill Vivi's dad. Sabo would never do something like that. While Luffy rolled around in frustration, Robin agreed with him. The enemies of the Revolutionary Army are the Celestial Dragons, not the kings themselves. They read about the revolutionaries declaring war on the world nobles, that Sabo assassinated King Cobra, and that Princess Vivi had gone missing. Luffy demanded that they set course for Alabasta immediately. While tending to his sword, Zoro pointed out the fact that the king was already dead and Vivi went missing at Marijoa, so going to Alabasta would be pointless. In that case, Luffy demanded that they go straight to the Holy Land. While locked up in a barrel, Caribou was freaking out after just barely hearing them. Zoro yelled at his captain, saying that Marijoa is the enemy's home turf. While kicking the barrel, he questioned if Luffy wanted to fight Navy headquarters. Luffy didn't mind doing that at all and asked if Zoro was scared or something. This only pissed Zoro off more. All he was saying was that they didn't have anything to go off and told Luffy to just calm down. At the same time, Sanji was crying his eyes out, worried about Vivi, praying for her to be alright. Chopper was crying too after hearing that King Cobra, someone that was so nice to pirates like them, was dead. Usopp was angry that such an ideal king was gone, while Nami shuffled with worry over her friend and how she must be feeling right now. Jinbei noted just how troublesome the Reverie seemed to be this time around. Frankie was pretty sure they met Luffy's brother back in Dressrosa, and Brook was pretty sure he'd never heard of Alabasta suffering from poor leadership. Nami couldn't hold back the tears anymore and desperately wanted to know where Vivi was. Luffy did too and was ready to go save her, something that Chopper wholeheartedly agreed with. Zoro took a deep breath. He reminded Luffy what he said when this happened to Ace. Luffy reluctantly remembered himself saying that Ace has his own adventures. Zoro continued that until his brother was in undeniable danger, their captain let him live his own life. He insisted that Vivi can figure things out on her own since she's a strong woman. When the time comes for them to act, they'll fight whoever they need to. But while there's nothing to be done, they'll just have to put up with it. Luffy couldn't argue with his logic, but was angry that Zoro wouldn't at least let him vent a little. With their tongues out, Luffy, Nami, Chopper, and Sanji all mocked Zoro. Luffy called him an ogre from Onigashima, Nami called him Green Kaido, Chopper called him Green Mom, and Sanji went with his usual moss head joke. Zoro only seemed to hear Sanji and told Mr. 4th Place Bounty to shut his mouth. While Zoro and Sanji clashed in the background, Robin spoke of just how many things happened while they were on Wano, and they were all rapidly developing. She mentioned how the dissolution of the warlord system resulted in several high-level pirates being unleashed upon the sea, something that furthermore led to the creation of Cross Guild. And from there, the new Emperor of the Sea, Buggy, the genius jester. At this point, Luffy was sick and tired of all the fake news. Robin continued to say that there were even more names with connection to Luffy in the paper and wondered if he wanted to know. He thought about it for a moment, but decided to leave it to Robin. She could just tell him if it was anything really bad. The historian happily agreed, knowing that he'd probably had enough news for one day. Luffy fell onto his back and again said that Sabo didn't do it. Robin agreed. Luffy continued to say that Sabo grew up in a controlling home, that he just wants everyone to be free. He remembered his big bro saying that he wants to see the world and write a book about it. To that, Luffy expressed his own dream. Now smiling, Luffy told his crew that he had sworn an oath with Sabo and Ace. That's when he finally told them his dream. Everyone was shocked by what he said. Zoro, Jinbei, and Nami could not believe their ears. Brook, meanwhile, was crying with laughter. Usopp didn't think Luffy could possibly be serious. Frankie was crying with laughter too and was all for it. Sanji laughed and told Chopper that he might need to check out their captain's brain. Robin was at a loss for words, and Chopper was over the moon with amazement. Usopp was pretty sure that even Luffy knows something like that is impossible, but Luffy figured it might be once he becomes the king of the pirates. Usopp couldn't even imagine someone thinking of something like that. Luffy was surprised he'd never mentioned it to any of them before. The sniper confirmed this, and although he didn't really mind, he was sure it was impossible. Thinking back, Luffy realized he had only ever said it to Shanks, Ace, and Sabo then. Robin wondered what they said in response. Luffy fell on his back with a big smile on his face, remembering how they all laughed. Shanks even had tears in his eyes. Happy with the thought, Luffy declared that it would all be at the end of his dream. Jinbei burst into tearful laughter. He figured that since he was officially a Straw Hat, he'd have to take it seriously. Luffy sure was one hell of a captain for him to swear his loyalty to. Chopper was totally amazed and told their leader how great his dream is. Nami had to admit that it did sound like something Luffy would want. Frankie insisted that it definitely wouldn't be possible without Luffy at least being king of the pirates. All they needed to do was find one more road poneglyph, and then they would be able to go to Laugh Tale. Robin insisted that Frankie avoid making it sound so simple. After all, it is the final poneglyph that no one's been able to find for a very long time. There were absolutely no clues as to where it could be. Returning to Marine headquarters, the signal from Sabo's call was still in the process of being traced. Apparently, there was no white Denden Mushi jamming it, meaning this was an emergency call. Sabo would hang up soon. The 5 elders were listening in and received confirmation that Sabo was in the kingdom of Lulusia. They considered this for a moment with a bit of concern. Imu was listening too. Lulusia was one of the 8 countries that had recently revolted, making it the perfect place for Sabo to be hiding. Understanding the situation, they considered Sabo to be an unlucky man. No, it was simply destiny. Back in the Kamabaka Queendom, the Revolutionaries listened to Sabo apologize for all the trouble. Ivo was just happy that the boy was okay. Sabo then spoke strongly to Dragon. He shouted that he wasn't the one who killed King Cobra. All of his friends were relieved to hear this, but Sabo wasn't done. Back when he was in Marijoa, he saw something terrible. They all wondered what he was talking about. At the same time, the sky above Lulusia grew dark. The populace wondered if something was up with the clouds. It was as if a massive object was hovering above them. In the dungeon, King Seki and Princess Komane of Lulusia yelled at the rebellious subjects for imprisoning them, insisting that when the Marines arrive, they'd all be slaughtered. Their former subjects just told their old sovereign to just confess his crimes. They didn't want to have to kill him. Imu continued to listen as Sabo spoke of the empty throne in Pangaea Castle. The Shadow Ruler casually crossed Lulusia off of the map, while the communications department was abruptly told to cut off the Denden Mushi. Much to their confusion, Sabo kept shouting that the throne that's supposed to stay empty forever because there is no king of the world actually has. He didn't get to finish before the call was cut. As something began to make noise overhead, the communications department was told that they didn't detect anything today. As a bright light overtook the island, a little girl told her dad that she was scared. Sabo looked up in shock. The Marines were told they didn't intercept anything. Imu continued to listen while the light grew even brighter. Everyone looked to the sky. The kingdom of Lulusia? That country never existed in the first place. A cataclysmic bombardment from the heavens above absolutely annihilated the location. The Revolutionaries lost contact with Sabo. A sea quake was detected in the open sea to the southeast. A tsunami warning was issued. Because of this event, in the East Blue, the people of Logtown dealt with an earthquake. In the South Blue, people were forced to evacuate due to the impending tsunami. The same was the case for the West Blue and North Blue. The earthquake felt on this day was of a scale well beyond anything ever seen in recorded history. It caused vast destruction to the entire world. It was impossible to pinpoint the epicenter, making it a truly unprecedented seismic event. Perhaps it was unrelated, but this earthquake arrived just 6 days after the kingdom of Lulusia vanished. Looking where the island once was, there was absolutely no trace of the land left. There was a massive hole in the sea that waterfalls poured into. To get any closer was impossible, and there was no sign of the hole closing up. This earthquake caused the sea level of the entire world to rise by roughly 1 meter. This caused the loss of many beaches around the world, which was the case for the Kamabaka Queendom as well, along with several other locations. Countless civilians were forced to leave their homes forever. There were reports of flooding coming in from all over the planet. Even Luffy's home of Fushia Village faced similar challenges. Sometime later in the Kamabaka Queendom, an unknown ship slowly made its way to the island. The vice commanders of the Revolutionary Army's various divisions gathered to meet the mysterious vessel head-on. Ahiru of the East Army immediately prepared a mechanical arm, totally prepared to blast it. Gambo of the South Army asked Jiran of the North Army if he wanted to make a bet. He wagered that it was an enemy ship and wanted to know how much his friend was willing to gamble. Jiran was happy to accept and was prepared to put 1 million berries on it being Sabo's return, much to the shock of his round friend. It didn't take long for Eva and Dragon to be told about Sabo's return, which was a total relief for Eva, while Dragon just remained silent. When Sabo's ship finally docked, Gambo refused to pay up since Jiran cheated, but Jiran insisted. That's when Gambo realized that his buddy saw Sabo through a looking glass. To hide the evidence, Jiran quickly started to eat it. Once he got off the ship, Ahiru let Sabo know that she nearly shot him. He was glad she didn't and wondered if she was worried about him. She played coy, but the answer was obvious. Ushiano, vice captain of the West Army, was overjoyed to see his buddy again. Pointing to the ship, Sabo let them know that it was from Lulusia, which shocked them all since the whole kingdom vanished. He promised to explain later, but for now, the people that came with him needed to rest. But this was all interrupted by Koala furiously shouting his name. With a flurry of fishman karate kicks, she yelled at him for going silent after the call dropped. Sabo apologized while evading and letting her know that he couldn't get his hands on a jamming transponder snail. If he tried to call them, the enemy would have intercepted it. Apparently, he had sent an indirect call signal. He wasn't actually in Lulusia. Crying and clutching onto him, Koala told Sabo how worried she was, which he apologized for too. Morley arrived with the same kind of energy, much to everyone's dismay. Commander of the East Army, Bello Betty, recognized the refugees from Lulusia. It was a shame what happened to their homeland, but she heard that they wanted to join their forces. They all agreed, but for now, what they needed most was rest so they would be able to clear their heads. From there, Sabo met with Dragon and Eva privately. Sabo had already heard about Kuma's sudden departure by then. Dragon apologized for wasting his junior's efforts, but Sabo knew that it must be harder for the two of them since they're all longtime friends. Dragon theorized that Kuma may have been programmed with some sort of directive to return to the Holy Land at any moment. Eva questioned why they couldn't include the commanders in this meeting, but Sabo insisted. Simply hearing what he was about to say would no doubt put their lives in the utmost danger. That statement alone was shocking. Sabo confirmed that the Reverie truly was an unbelievable event, and with that, he would tell them both exactly what really happened in the Holy Land. Sabo told them that he managed to complete all of his objectives. To put things simply, there were 3. The first one entailed the destruction of the Celestial Dragon symbol as a declaration of war. The second was to free as many slaves as possible and take back Kuma. The third was to enter the land of the gods and destroy their food supply. He asked his seniors how he did. Dragon admitted that Sabo sure did get the world's attention, and because of that, he also managed to keep a large portion of the Navy's strength busy. Their influence in 12 countries around the world inspired the people to take up arms against their oppressors, resulting in 8 successful revolutions. But Eva chimed in that Lulusia was one of those 8, and it mysteriously vanished without a trace. Dragon added that although they won't write it in the papers, the 7 countries that are now under their leadership have cut off all heavenly tribute to the world government and have stopped exporting their natural resources. Eva happily let him know that all over the world, revolutionaries were attacking world government cargo ships, cutting off vital supply lines to the Holy Land. They like to call Marijoa an impenetrable fortress because of its supreme elevation. But with a sinister smile, Eva noted that they have no defense against a lack of food. He could not wait to see how they like living without money or food for once. He couldn't help himself from letting out a triumphant battle cry. This was bound to hit them hard. The revolutionaries hadn't managed to cut off all their supply lines just yet, but they were no doubt beginning to feel the pain in the capital. But with a grim expression, Dragon emphasized the fact that the world nobles aren't the sort of people to struggle in silence. He was certain that if they mobilized the Holy Knights, then the real fighting would begin. Eva called out to Sabo, but quickly corrected himself to say Flame Emperor. He was the one they'd be after the most. Sabo really wasn't much of a fan of that name. Rummaging a bit, Dragon said that regardless of the truth behind it, the assassination of King Cobra has turned the boy into a hero in the people's eyes. Pouring them each a drink, he continued to say that from the outlook of the rebellious, anyone affiliated with the world government is an enemy. There are no doubt several oppressive kings out there, but he also knows that there are wise and fair kings out there too. Alabasta's king was well known as a noble leader of great character, but news doesn't always spread accurately. Sabo felt bad for King Cobra, but admitted that this result suits him just fine. As long as he gets the flames of revolution burning, he doesn't mind. Dragon admired his attitude, while Eva was ready to hear the full story already. Presenting the newspaper's horrible imagery to Sabo, they wanted to know the truth. They all prayed for there to be a reason for Sabo to do such a thing. They all wanted to believe in him. Sabo looked at the paper for a while before beginning his story. More than a month before, during the Reverie, the Holy Land of Marijoa was under attack. The Celestial Dragons ran for their lives as their food storage exploded. 4 of the Revolutionary Army's commanders had been spotted. The world nobles were in an uproar after seeing both their holy symbol and gourmet food be destroyed. They were sure that this was just the jealousy of nameless peasants and demanded their heads. Another added that once that was handled, their security forces were to be killed next for letting this happen to them. A buck-toothed Celestial whipped the pirate slave he was using as a mule, telling him to go faster. Fed up with the slow pace, he decided to walk on his own and raise a pistol to officially fire the man. But before he could, a crow swiped the gun away, giving it to a man on the top of a roof. The crow then returned to the pirate's side and told him to run into town to the east. The Cypherpole agents on the scene shot at the rebel. They told St. Plumbing to get to safety, but the Celestial insisted that they shower the enemy in bullets. They believed the man to be dead, but soon realized that something was off. A strange substance wafted past them, and suddenly the figure appeared behind them all. With a single move, Karasu, commander of the North Army, used the power of his Soot Soot fruit to defeat them all. At the same time, lasers were shot and severed several chains. A cat mink with a jetpack and top hat told the many slaves to wait on the east side of the town, promising to get them all out of here. They all thanked him with tears in their eyes, but he didn't want any until they were all safe. The South Army's captain was surprised by the huge explosion in the distance. Just then, one of Karasu's soot crows let him know that the enemy was heading his way and he needed to liberate the people faster. Karasu himself was dealing with Admiral Fujitora. He sent a flurry of soot crows towards his opponent. The determination was written all over his face. Meanwhile, the West Army's commander Morley was happily facing off against Admiral Ryokugyu in his massive tree form. Morley wondered why the man was so angry, but seeing as they were wrecking the city, the answer was pretty obvious to Green Bull. He demanded to know where their leader had gone, but Morley called the tree man a pervert for trying to invade their privacy like that. A handful of celestial dragons were caught up in the commotion as the two men bickered. One of them let the admiral know that he would be put to death if any one of them gets hurt. Ryokugyu's frustration only grew as he wondered to himself how they expected him to possibly do his job then. He needed them to get out of the way. Fujitora was in the middle of preparing his next attack before being asked what he was doing. When he said he was planning on dropping a meteor, he was fiercely told to do anything but that. There were two admirals on the scene here. If it wasn't the land of the gods, they would be able to handle the situation far more easily. Standing alongside his fellow CP0 agents, Bluno had to admit that the revolutionaries were putting up one hell of a fight, handicap or not. Kumadori was impressed by both the strength and weirdness of the various army commanders. Each was doing their absolute best here. Karasu asked Sabo over Denden Mushi if he'd found the slave callers yet. The chief of staff told him that it wouldn't be much longer since he now knew the location. He shifted the call to Lindbergh. While hiding behind a wall, he told his comrade that Kuma had been moved to Pangaea Castle too. He saw him with St. Roswald and his son St. Charlos. He was pretty sure that they were planning to get revenge for what happened in the courtyard earlier. It was clear that the Celestial hadn't given up on making Princess Shirahoshi his slave just yet. The revolutionaries refused to let him use Kuma in such a terrible way, and Morley was told to get ready. Jewelry Bonney was inside the castle too, concerned about her father Kuma. Elsewhere, Princess Vivi told Rob Lucci to leave her alone. She planned on asking Vice Admiral Garp for help. Pigeon Guy insisted that they were here to protect her. Vivi quickly retorted that he sure didn't help Princess Shirahoshi back in the courtyard. She knew he wasn't stupid. The same nobles were bound to target her again. At the same time, a guard told King Cobra's security detail that only the sovereign would be permitted to meet with the five elders. They began to protest, but King Cobra was quick to tell Chaka and Pell that the meeting wouldn't take long. He didn't want them to wait around getting bored. Instead, he told them to watch over his tomboy of a daughter. At the same time, the Holy Land's guards were set ablaze. Sabo managed to defeat an entire group of them by his lonesome. Just then, a person entered the room, questioning if he was Sabo. Shocked, he recognized her to be the pirate Jewelry Bonney. She was happy to know that they could skip the introductions and was certain that they had the same goal in mind. They quickly fled the guard room after stealing the slave collar keys. While running, Sabo mentioned how he had heard Kuma had a daughter. Bonney told him that she had been following news about the Revolutionary Army, and that's why she trusted them to take her dad to safety. To interrupt them, Karasu's Soot Crow appeared. Sabo gave him the keys and wanted him to tell the others that once Kuma and all the slaves were free, they should return to headquarters. Karasu wondered what Sabo would do. The chief of staff claimed that he would be right behind them once he handles a bit of business on his own. Once that was done, he asked Bonney what her next move would be. She was planning to go to Egghead Island and ask Vegapunk if there was a way to make her dad his old self again, or else. Before Sabo could respond, more guards started running after them. Sabo managed to hide them on the top of a pillar. The guards mentioned how there were even fewer of them than before, and the castle was way too big for them to completely cover. Another explained that people usually go missing because they saw it, something they shouldn't have. The Lost Chamber. Even just mentioning it was dangerous, but this only piqued Sabo's interest even more. After that, Bonney thanked him for helping her escape. Since Egghead was in the opposite direction, they would have to split up. But Sabo wished her good luck. Bonney had to admit that it felt really strange to have the revolutionaries doing her favors like this, but ultimately, they wanted to save the same person. Leaving, Bonney asked them to take care of her dad. While this was happening, the five elders faced King Cobra and asked what he wanted to speak to them about. Cobra wondered where he should begin. He started by saying that the world government as they know it today began 800 years ago after being created by a group of 20 kings. They all remained silent as he continued to say that those very monarchs then moved to the Holy Land with their respective families. They became known as Celestial Dragons and ruled the world for the next 8 centuries. Among them, the 20 kings have always remained equal to prevent one from ruling over the others. They created the empty throne and placed 20 weapons around it to commemorate their oath to never claim the seat. In the 20 kingdoms that lost their royal families, new kings were chosen and continue to rule to this very day. Thanks to this, the names of the first 20 dynasties were removed from all historical records. However, his kingdom of Alabasta was different. The monarch at the time was Queen Lily of the Nefertari dynasty, who was counted among the first 20 but did not become a celestial dragon. Instead, she decided to go back to her homeland of Alabasta and continue the Nefertari line as its rulers. For that reason, there were actually only 19 weapons surrounding the empty throne. The elders confirmed the truth of Cobra's words, but wondered what his point was. King Cobra continued by saying that he had gone through old historical records of the royal library. The only history available there comes from documents after the Void Century, and yet there isn't a single mention of Queen Lily's name. She didn't return to Alabasta to rule afterwards. Her younger brother took the throne in Alabasta instead. King Cobra wanted to know if there was anything they might be able to tell him about her. The elders were surprised to hear that this was what King Cobra wanted to talk about. They reminded him that all of this was ancient history. It was a historical fact that the ruler from the Nefertari dynasty did not live in the Holy Land, but they simply assumed that Queen Lily returned to her homeland. Regardless of her reasons or actions thereafter, the details of all that were lost to time. They apologized, but admitted that there was no way for them to help him. Hearing this, King Cobra frowned and remained silent for a moment. In that case, he would ask another question. What is the D? Much to the shock of them all, their expressions grew dark as they questioned why he would ask such a thing. In response, King Cobra told them that there was in fact a brief letter dating back 800 years that Queen Lily had passed down through the Nefertari royal family, which certainly got their attention. While all this was going down, Princess Shirahoshi cried out as Kuma was made to bind her with chains at the behest of Saint Charlos. He was horribly excited to make her his plaything as she called out for someone to help her. However, the many royals that had previously crowded around her quickly ran away in fear of incurring a celestial dragon's wrath. The mermaid princess's brothers quickly entered the fray, but were held back by the men that warned them against causing any trouble, otherwise, Fishman Island would surely be destroyed. Still, Fukaboshi did not care about the consequences when it came to saving his beloved sister. But before any of them could save her, Saint Charlos commanded his invincible slave to destroy them all, resulting in the launch of a massive laser beam. Regardless, the princess remained undeterred, and so did the celestial dragon. Soon after, Rebecca and Leo of the Tontada Pirates joined the fray. Sai was there too, and Saint Miosgard claimed that he would take full responsibility for whatever happens here, so they were free to attack. However, he refused to allow Fukaboshi to engage on account of him being royalty. Infuriated by the man's continued treachery, Saint Charlos commanded Kuma to exterminate his fellow Celestial too. Fukaboshi didn't understand why the man was getting in his way, but Miosgard argued that the others could simply run away since they have no nation to support. After all, they're pirates. The two members of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet prepared their respective moves. They furiously charged towards their target as the many onlookers urged them not to. But it was too late. Tail Hammer! Dragon Nail! They crushed the filthy man's head and lodged him into the ground. Certain of his death, the royals were terrified. This was a major incident. It was the murder of a celestial dragon. Kuma prepared a follow-up beam aimed at the two attackers. But before it could be launched, Morley emerged from the ground and grabbed hold of him. As tears fell, Morley told Kuma that it was all over now. He wouldn't have to follow their orders anymore and that they were bringing him back home with them. Everyone was shocked to see a giant, but then Karasu gave him an update on the key situation and they all realized that they were revolutionaries. From there, they fled the scene as St. Roswald cried out in dismay over the horrible state of his son. But unbeknownst to them all, a lone figure ascended beyond the five elders. Seeing the Great Imu, they shouted a warning that King Cobra was still in attendance. The ruler of Alabasta froze with fear and disbelief. The piercing gaze of the one true ruler of the world was accompanied by the utterance of the name, Lily. And with that, they sat atop the empty throne. King Cobra struggled to breathe as he recalled the fact that no one is meant to sit upon that throne. A single person is not supposed to be able to rule the entire world. Imu spoke to the lesser ruler, stating that there were 2 things they wished to say and 1 thing they planned to ask. Coughing terribly, Cobra managed to boldly ask who this person was. He knew of the name Imu, but was sure that it must be a coincidence, as they were among the original 20 kings. But before he could finish, Lord Imu told him not to seek the answer, as it would not be provided. However, they would address his previous question. The D is the name of those who once opposed them. That those who now possess it and appear across the world are nothing but empty husks, completely ignorant to the meaning of their name. However, the recent development stems from Queen Lily's great mistake 800 years ago, along with the curiosity of scholars looking into the Void Century, along with the influx of pirates seeking the poneglyphs in pursuit of treasure. If it wasn't for Queen Lily's mistake on that dreaded day, the irksome poneglyphs would have never been scattered across the world. King Cobra was too stunned to speak. Imu continued to say that this unfortunate event of the past may have a disastrous explanation. Was the spread of the poneglyphs truly just a mistake, or was it planned? King Cobra remained silent as each of the 5 elders clutched onto their weapons. Imu was all but certain that the answer to that question would be found within Lily's letter. However, Cobra only spoke of Queen Lily of the Nefertari dynasty, so it was questioned why he continued to hide it from Mu. Cobra wasn't expecting that at all. They demanded that he tell Mu the proper name of the sender. And with that, King Cobra was certain that they would not allow him to leave this room alive. Aloud, he asked them if he'd be able to escape by telling a lie. The elders responded that the moment he laid eyes on the great Imu, his fate was already sealed. King Cobra's breathing grew heavier. After all, he had just seen the greatest taboo in the world. Sabo was just outside, but knew that something was very wrong. King Cobra admitted that the letter was signed by the Queen of Alabasta 800 years ago. Sabo snuck in just in time to hear it. Her name was Nefertari D. Lily. Lord Imu remained still before narrowing their eyes. D. Suddenly, a dark arrowhead raced towards the old king and pierced through him. In response, Sabo leapt into action and delivered a huge fire fist that engulfed all the elders. He followed this up with a rook check as flames raced towards the figure seated upon the empty throne. Imu remained still before fury overtook their gaze as they questioned where the invader had come from. Their form expanded and completely devoured the incoming flames. Sabo and Cobra were surrounded by a myriad of horrific figures. The Revolutionary would have liked to have been able to take them all down here and now, but that did not seem to be an option anymore. He could not believe that there was such a horrific truth at the pinnacle of the world. As King Cobra laid at his feet, a Denden Mushi on the wall managed to snap his picture. Struggling to speak, King Cobra recognized the man to be Luffy's brother. He questioned why a revolutionary would seek to save a king. Sabo explained that the real enemies were the guys above the kings, but wondered how he knew Luffy. Cobra responded that Luffy had once saved his life too, which made the chief of staff smile, and it sure did sound like something his little brother would do. From there, he lifted King Cobra onto his back and began to flee the scene. Cobra urged him to escape on his own since it was too late for him, but Sabo refused. As he neared death's door, King Cobra told Sabo that he had realized something very important today. Sabo could not afford to die here. He needed a message to be sent to both Luffy and Princess Vivi. He needed to tell them that they also bear the D. Finally, he was able to see a way forward for Alabasta. That's when Sabo remembered an earlier conversation with his 2 brothers. While eating some food, he wondered if it was just a coincidence that both of them had D in their names. They hadn't really realized on their own, but didn't care much about it. Luffy asked the kid if he wanted one too. That way he would be Sadbo. But Sabo wasn't happy since that's not where it's supposed to go. Just then, the same arrow-headed tail raced towards them and pierced both of them simultaneously. Blood spewed from Sabo's mouth, but he was more worried about King Cobra, who'd fallen off of his back. As one of the monsters rushed towards them, King Cobra stood to his feet and began speaking of the poneglyphs. He mentioned something needing to be protected and bearing the flag of the Dawn, but a growl overtook his final words. He then spoke the name of his ancestor once more, Nefertari D. Lily. He was counting on Sabo to deliver this final message. He absolutely needed to survive. The king was dead. But the monsters soon noticed that yet another presence was observing them. From an ever so tiny hole in the wall, there was a horrified single eye peering in. Wapol rushed away from it as quickly as he could in utter disbelief that they had just killed Cobra. He didn't like the guy, but could hardly celebrate something so awful, something that he absolutely shouldn't have seen. He ran as fast as he could after learning the world government's darkest secret. At the same time, Princess Vivi had been captured inside a guest room and was absolutely furious. She was being held hostage by the members of CP0, who were sure that she'd be marked down as missing and end up being a celestial dragon's pet. They were surprised to hear that she was more concerned about Princess Shirahoshi's situation than her own, but assured her that the other princess was fine. Much to her relief, Cobra added that the guys who nearly killed a celestial dragon proudly proclaimed themselves to be followers of Straw Hat Luffy, which only made matters worse. While in the Holy Land, Admiral Fujitora ended up helping the Revolutionary Army free slaves, which caused Ryokugyu to snap and turn on him. The Reverie was all just a big mess at this point. While they said all this, Vivi thought to herself that she needed to figure out a way to escape since there was no way she'd end up as someone's pet. That's when she heard a bit of commotion heading her way. It was Wapol. He was eating his way through the building in order to escape, claiming that he didn't see anything at all. Seeing all this happen, Vivi was sure that this would be her path towards freedom. The members of CP0 stood around, unsure of what just happened. Then they realized that Vivi was gone. Wapol's wife had been waiting for him outside, but was surprised to see a young woman with him. Vivi asked him where he was going, and the gluttonous king shouted back that he'd be getting as far away as he possibly could, to the ends of the earth where nobody would be able to follow, and Vivi wanted him to take her along too, causing the man's wife to believe that they were eloping. Soon after, those who had accompanied Vivi and Cobra were in a total uproar as they searched for their sovereigns. On the ships of various royal families, there were a number of stowaways hiding out. With the transponder snail in hand, Wapol asked his partner in crime what country's ship they were on. Apparently, it belonged to the Aegis Kingdom. Big News Morgans heard the message loud and clear. He planned to bring his office to the ship under the guise of reporting so that they would be able to sneak aboard. A king fleeing for his life was bound to be big news. Vivi wondered what Wapol had seen, but he refused to say it, especially not to her. He told her to go back on her own ship, but she couldn't on account of Cypher Pole. She insisted that he let her call her father since he tends to worry, but the big man claimed that that was the last thing she wanted to do right now, much to her frustrated confusion. While they hid away, the members of CP0 went looking for Vivi and Sabo specifically. Bonney was feeling hungry while hiding aboard the Tajine Kingdom ship. Reeling from his wounds, he painfully remembered King Cobra's words, that he was counting on him, and that he needs to survive. Soon after, news broke of King Cobra's assassination and the disappearance of his daughter. Back in Marijoa, the five elders were discussing Sabo. They considered him another man with a checkered fate, that no one has led a life more affected by the D than him. However, they also wanted to be done with their business on Egghead Island. They then received a call from the great Imu. Their lord wished to use Dr. Vegapunk's creation, the Mother Flame. The elders agreed, believing it needed to be tested. In fact, the results could very well influence how they decide to proceed on Egghead. It was proposed that a test on forested land would be better than one on the open sea. But Imu had already decided that it would be used on Lulusia Kingdom. Grimly, their lord was reminded that there were many people there, but Imu didn't care. Ultimately, the world would be as the creator wills it. However, they did wonder why Lulusia was chosen for such a fate. Imu responded that it is close. The godhead of science and defense, St. J. Garcia Saturn, agreed to take the necessary steps to make it happen. The godhead of environment, St. Marcus Mars, mentioned that there were signs of rebellion among Lulusia's populace. The godhead of justice, St. Topman Warcurry, accepted that it may serve as an example to others. The godhead of finance, St. Ethan Baron V. Nusjuro, pondered the possibility of using its power freely. The godhead of agriculture, St. Shepherd Jew Peter, continued the thought by saying that they'll be able to finally conclude their ancient battle. Imu had one more request, however. Mu desires Vivi, and they would ensure it. The Marines were stretched thin between rebellions and the abolishment of the Seven Warlord system. However, this simply made way for the Seraphim, a whole new Marine initiative. Sabo told his comrades that the moment they landed in Lulusia, the people were ready and took the king and princess of the country as prisoners. They then welcomed the Flame Emperor with open arms when he came out of hiding. This was the first time Sabo got a hold of the newspaper and saw that he was accused of regicide. They treated him as a hero, and although he wanted to tell them the truth, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Not when their passion for revolution was so strong. Lulusia was full of motivated people who wanted to join the Revolutionary Army, and those are the folks he managed to bring back with him. Since he didn't have a jamming Den Mushi, he couldn't send a signal back home. So instead, he sent a relay call as they were leaving port. That way, if the world government picked up the signal, they'd assume he was on Lulusia, while in reality, he was already at sea with new recruits. Eva presumed that the vanishing of Lulusia happened while Sabo was on the call. Sabo confirmed this and mentioned how horrible the scene was on the ship. Most of the recruits had left families behind. They could only watch as their home was utterly destroyed. Hearing about this tragedy, Dragon wondered what in the world happened. Sabo explained that a great shadow covered the entire sky. That part made Dragon's expression grow even darker. Sabo described it as something no natural living creature could explain. Something dark and vast flew above the clouds. Eva then brought up Sabo's mention of the name Imu. He then mentioned how among the first 20 that created the world 800 years ago, there was a monarch by the name of Saint Imu of the Nerona dynasty. Eva then showed him a book. It was said that the means to create everlasting life exists in this world. For that to be the case, someone would have needed to prove it. He was certain that someone out there has been living for ages without dying. Sabo wondered if that's who he saw before. Eva admitted that the name itself could just be a coincidence. But considering the 5 elders are the highest authority among the world nobles, he couldn't imagine anyone else being able to rule over men like them. But there was yet another wild leap to be made. If what Sabo saw fly above the clouds and destroy an entire country was a world government weapon, then only Dr. Vegapunk could have possibly created it. Eva pointed directly at Dragon then, who in turn assured his friend that Vegapunk would never build such a blatant tool of murder. But Eva expected that response. More seriously, he questioned if it might be an ancient weapon. If Imu were alive since ancient times, it would all link up. Dragon added that Robin confirmed to them that the ancient weapons are real. But if the world government possesses one of them, why have they not used it before? And why would they use it now? A bit later in the present day, a single celestial dragon had just been executed. But this news was not shared with the world. The Celestials were desperately low on food. All they had left was cake. The man who passed the sentence was Saint Figarland Garling, Supreme Commander of the Holy Knights, a figure that once distinguished himself at a place known as God Valley. The fellow celestial dragon he had just executed for protecting fishmen was Saint Don Quixote Miosgard. It was Garling's belief that by standing up for subhumans, Miosgard's worth had sunk even below theirs. As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.